Friedrich August von Hayek. A well-known Austrian-British economist and political philosopher, a representative of neoliberalism, he has profound insights into market economy theory and market operation mechanisms. In 1974, they were awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics for their groundbreaking research on monetary policy and business cycles and their incisive analysis of the impact of the interaction between the economy, society, and institutions. In 1984, on the recommendation of British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, he was awarded an honorary knighthood by Queen Elizabeth III in recognition of his contributions to economic research. In 1991, Hayek was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in recognition of his lifelong foresight. His representative works include The Road to Serfdom and Individualism and Economic Order. Hayek died in Freiburg, Germany, in 1992 at the age of 93. In 1991, the world-class Red Empire that had stood for more than half a century collapsed. At that moment, people kept mumbling, and among them, one name kept floating above the red ruins. That name is Friedrich August von Hayek, and it is he who can be regarded as the most important prophet of this historic moment. To commemorate the 50th anniversary of the publication of Hayek's classic work, The Road to Serfdom, the University of Chicago Press reprinted the book. On its cover, it is clearly printed nearly half a century ago. When Hayek published The Road to Serfdom, most intelligent people scoffed at it. The famous Hungarian economist Cornell also wrote in the late 1980s, looking back over the past 50 years, we can draw the conclusion that Hayek was correct on every point in the debate with the planned economy. In awarding Hayek the Medal of Freedom, President George W. Bush praised him as one of the great thinkers of our time, who explored the scope and contours of freedom, and who revolutionized the intellectual and political life of the world. The world was wrong, and Hayek was right. It is well deserved that a thinker who stood alone against the world's frenzy has received such a high reputation. Hayek is a staunch supporter of the free market economy and believes that the market is the most efficient mechanism for resource allocation. In today's era of market economy, let us take a look at the path this economist and political philosopher has pointed out to us. Starting from freedom, both freedom and equality can be achieved. Starting from equality, both equality and freedom will be lost. Why are some problems never solved? Because the people who solve the problems are the ones who create them. They are directing and acting in their own dramas. If, in the long run, we are the creators of our own destiny, in the short run, we are prisoners of the ideas we create. Only if we recognize this danger in time can we hope to avoid it. If a person does not need to obey anyone, but only the law, then he is free. What always turns a country into a living hell is precisely the attempt to turn it into a paradise. Democracy is essentially a practical means to ensure domestic stability and personal freedom. It is by no means always correct and reliable. Money is one of the greatest instruments of freedom ever invented by man. It is the only thing in existing society that opens up to the poor an astonishing range of choices, a range greater than ever before open to the rich. Socialists will certainly prove that, at least in the beginning, the road is not to freedom, but to dictatorship and anti-dictatorship, to the most terrible civil war. Socialism achieved and maintained by democratic means does seem to belong to the utopian world. Control over the production of wealth is control over human life itself. What makes contemporary events different from historical ones is that we do not know what their consequences will be. Only in the liberal era was the rule of law consciously developed and is one of the greatest achievements of the liberal era. It is not only a guarantee of freedom, but also the legal embodiment of freedom. The rule of law means that the government cannot coerce individuals except to implement well-known rules. Where there is no property right, there is no justice. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Money is the greatest instrument of freedom ever invented by man. Only money will be open to the poor, and rights will never be. A country where rich people are in power is far better than a country where one can only become rich after coming to power. Freedom means obedience to common abstract rules. Slavery means obedience to common concrete goals. Nothing distinguishes more clearly the state of a free country from that of a country under despotic government than the observance in the former of that great principle which is called the rule of law. Dictatorship is the most effective instrument for enforcing ideals, and is itself indispensable if centralized planning is to be possible to any great extent. In a country where the government is the only employer, resistance means slow death by starvation. The old principle, "He who does not work shall not eat," has been replaced by the new principle, "He who does not obey shall not eat." Protecting private property to the greatest extent possible is definitely the most important necessary condition for the continuation of human society. The rule of law means that the government is bound in all its actions by ex-ante rules, which enable the individual to foresee with considerable certainty how the authority will use its coercive power in certain circumstances and to plan his personal affairs accordingly. Freedom, obedience to common abstract rules. Slavery, obedience to common specific goals. The government cannot print money indiscriminately because this will cause the economic environment to deteriorate, the real industry to become oligopolistic, and the financial system or financial companies to become the privileged aristocracy in society. Facts have proved that years of printing money often make the wage increases of most ordinary people far less than the rate of currency depreciation. Rising prices and punishing savings leads to no savings, widening the gap between the rich and the poor, and the bankruptcy of small and medium-sized enterprises. Increased unemployment and bubbles in the financial system and real estate sectors will together lead to and aggravate cyclical depressions in the overall social economy. In this world, there is always a difference between treating others as equals and trying to make others equal. The former is a prerequisite for a free society, while the latter means a new form of slavery. Where the common beliefs of our generation will lead us is not a question of a particular party, but a question of each and every one of us, a question of the greatest significance. In a planned society, the control that the authorities exercise over all consumption has its origin in their control over production. The fact that in a competitive society, the opportunities of the poor are much more restricted than those of the rich does not in any way affect the fact that the poor in such a society are much freer than the possessors of great material comforts in a different type of society. The private property system is one of the main factors that give people limited freedom and equality, while Marx hopes to give people unlimited freedom and equality by eliminating this system. It is well said that the last resort of a competitive economy is appeal to the bailiff, while the final sanction of a planned economy is appeal to the hangman. When power itself appears in the guise of organization, it develops its extraordinary magic to the extent that it can transform a society of free peoples into a totalitarian state. The idea of complete centralized control of economic activity still frightens most people, not only because of the enormous difficulty of the task, but even more because of the fear aroused by the idea of everything being directed by a single center. Private property is the most important guarantee of freedom, not only for the propertied class, but also for the propertyless class. The purpose of law is not to abolish or restrict freedom, but to protect and expand freedom. In the true sense of law, no matter in which country, where there is no law, there is no freedom. Freedom frees us from the coercion and violence of others, which is unthinkable in a place without law. All roads to hell are originally preparations for heaven. Money is naturally free, but now it is bound. The history of money is essentially a process of artificial inflation. Many utopians claim that the Great Depression is inseparable from the capitalist system. Where justice is ignored, where equality, the core of justice, is constantly denied in the provisions of positive law. The law there is not just unjust law, but has completely lost the nature of law. The rule of law means that the government is bound in all its actions by ex-ante regulations, which enable the individual to foresee, with considerable certainty, how the authority will use its coercive power in certain circumstances and to plan his personal affairs accordingly. Freedom means obedience to common abstract rules. Slavery means obedience to common concrete goals. Nothing distinguishes more clearly the state of a free country from that of a country under despotic government than the observance in the former of that great principle which is called the rule of law. In a planned society, the control that the authorities exercise over all consumption has its origin in their control over production. The reason why economic values are so important to us is that in economic matters we are free to decide what is more important to us and what is less important to us. Dictatorship is the most effective instrument for enforcing ideals, and dictatorship itself is indispensable if centralized planning is to be possible to a large extent. Control over the production of wealth is control over human life itself. Only in the liberal era was the rule of law consciously developed, and is one of the greatest achievements of the liberal era. It is not only a guarantee of freedom, but also the legal embodiment of freedom. The desirability of an order lies not in the fact that it puts its elements in their proper place, but in the fact that new forces can grow on this order that could not grow under other circumstances. By giving the government unlimited power, the most arbitrary rule can be legitimized. A democratic system can in this way establish the most complete despotism imaginable.